Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
We are going to try something different this week on the M2M podcast. We're going to do a crossover. Cesar Delgado is the host of Backroads of Illinois. It's a podcast based in Ottawa, Illinois. And Cesar has a different story to tell. I'm going to let him tell his story. But this is going to look and sound differently than usual. But I think the information is important to know. And I want you to give a listen for somebody who is getting started in the farm broadcasting world. We discussed the world of broadcasting. He has a podcast and broadcasts across radio stations. And this is a guy who has a very strong passion for agriculture. And I think it comes through in what he is about to tell us on this installment of the MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. Here's Cesar Delgado and I and our conversation.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I am great.
Thanks to have me on your podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
As am I. I'm Paul Yeager with Market to Market based at Iowa PBS. And today we're doing a special crossover episode with Cesar Delgado. Hello, Cesar.
Hey, Paul, how are you? Thanks to have me on your podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
All I ask, Cesar, is that you go easy on me with questions because I have heard the type of questions you ask, and you are hard-hitting all around with all your ag journalists.
Because I like to listen about the impact on the agricultural industry.
Well, tell me a little bit about you, Cesar. Where do you live?
My name is Cesar Delgado from Ottawa, Illinois. I am a farm broadcaster for my show. It is Backroads of Illinois on YouTube and on the radio. I have my disability as served pastly with my communication device with my eyes.
You do all of your communication with your eyes on your podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why did you want to be a podcaster in agriculture?
First of all, I am not podcaster. Ha ha ha. I am a foreign broadcaster because I like to talk to people with great knowledge, and I am a people person.
You and I are the same then. That's a lot of what I like to do is and I use podcaster and broadcaster kind of the same in a way because we all kind of go in each other's formats. I mean, this is a podcast, but it could be on broadcast, and I also do a broadcast that becomes a podcast. So my apologies, no insults meant there.
People are taking advantage of podcasts on the TV. I don't like that
Really? Why not?
because they want more famous and money.
I can see that. I still think it boils down to information. Let's talk about information that you do on Backroads. What type of information are you trying to put out?
Ag markets and ag news, an interview with people in the agricultural industry.
Are there interviews that stand out to you that you have done that you think have been important?
I just finished my interview with Chris Wolf from Cornell University on dairy markets.
And I also have seen you do lots of other topics, but we'll get to those topics in a moment. Let's go back to some of the other guests of market analysts. At least that's what we call them on market to market. You've had some market analysts that help your broadcast. Why do you have them on?
Yeah, I appreciate their work since long time.
Tell me about your agriculture background and how you got involved and excited about agriculture.
My story is I was born with Serb Pasley. I was born as dead. Yeah, I'm living legend has a lot of goals for this life. I want to be achieved my goal, like getting married and education for farmers about the commodities and new seeds treatment. I was in high school and joined the FA. My parents are not in the agricultural industry, but my family was in the golden era.
Do you mean before the 1980s farm crisis?
Yeah, in Mexico.
Since this is a crossover episode, Caesar, I will let you ask some questions here of me. What can I answer for you?
How did you become a farm broadcaster?
Well, it's all about labels. You know how life can be, right? Because I don't necessarily think of myself as a farm broadcaster. I happen to be, I think, a broadcaster that covers farming and sports and news and politics. It's kind of all together. I like to think a little more broadly because to me, agriculture is heavy on economics. But I also think it's important to have a wide variety of things because I think farming is so important to everyday life. To truly answer your question, I grew up on a farm in Northeast Iowa in the 1980s, and there wasn't a place really for me to join the farm, and I really didn't have as much of an interest. I had much more of a interest in broadcasting, and I wanted to be the voice of the St. Louis Cardinals. And I went to college to get into television. And I felt that it was important to learn about all sorts of different parts of how shooting camera, editing video, being on television, running live shots, all those things. So I've went to a place called Wartburg College in Waverly, not a farm school by any means. My dad wanted us all to go to Iowa State, and none of us did. And I think it's important that I've had a varied background to understand those who are still on the farm, those who've left, and those who still need to be in contact with information about agriculture. That's what how I view my job. I worked in television news in Davenport, Mason City, Iowa, Des Moines, and I've been here at Iowa PBS going on almost 20 years now. and it quickly goes away. Time quickly gets away from you. I've been the host of Market to Market since 2020. I've worked on the show since about 2010 as a producer and a fill-in host. And I took over. I was always the fill-in guy for Mark Pearson and for Mike Pearson and for Delaney Howell. And then I took over in 2020. So that's how my path is. I've always kind of been involved with shaping the show or telling stories about the show. And then I sit in the host chair full time here since 2020.
How is the cash grains for Iowa?
That is a great question. And it's one that I pose to the people that come onto the show. I don't usually answer the questions. That's why this is a little fun for us both, Caesar, is that I'm not usually the one who answers those questions. But if you go back to a recent episode we had, Matt Bennett was talking about some of the basis levels. We do look at basis levels more than we look at cash. But Market to Market's a national show. And we try to give a national picture, world picture as best we can. And if there's something that's very specific to a state, we will talk about it, but that's usually more on the weather side of things. Like, hey, we hear it's dry in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. What's that going to do to the wheat market? That's about as close to a state-specific answer that I can give. How's that for a non-answer?
Who wants to have your show?
Who wants to have our show? I'd like to think who wants us are those that are still active in farming, those who may have retired, maybe those who grew up on the farm, those that care about the food they eat. So pretty much, I think that's everybody. That's who I think should want our show. But we struggle to walk a tightrope of too much technical information and not enough for the audience, knowing that a lot of our audience is super involved in agriculture and gets every single mention. There are those that don't. I try to be the in-between to both, try to not talk too technical on one end and try to not be too broad on the other, that I'm not being of a service. That's how I see my job as host when I'm talking to our analysts. Our news stories, I think everybody gets busy. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, how busy you get. And sometimes you can't quite keep you just can't quite keep everyone focused on every single moment of every single day. So our show in its 50-year history has been about the higher view, the weekly view, the more than 10,000-foot view of what's happening in agriculture. And that's what I think is what our show should be, or who should watch our show.
Do you want someone to do an interview on the show, Paul?
Oh, I think I want to interview somebody that's going to give me good, well thought insight. I want someone who, not necessarily a complete different view, but I think I want someone who certainly looks at the view of the markets differently. I mean, Caesar, you've heard several of your analysts that have come on your show might sound the same from time to time. It's pretty easy to get into talking points or even echo chambers about what's going on. And I really thoroughly enjoy someone who brings a book and studies things differently. I know Sue Martin is someone that our audience always talks about and discusses and says, she talks about moon phases and years of 4 and years of this. That's different than what somebody else will say of, well, the Chinese are going to do this, the Canadians are going to do this. I just kind of think I think we try to provide anywhere from 9 to 15, 9 to 12 different market analysts on a regular basis and their views of the market and their views, which I think is different because not everybody falls into a technical camp or a fundamental analysis camp. And that's how that, to me, is the type of guest that we have in that market-to-market analyst chair.
I want to have big people like Jim McCormick and Brian Split.
Absolutely a fair point. Absolutely great people and great insight. And, I'd like to think some of our people are big in their world, and our world is very specific when it comes to broadcasting as a whole. Brian Splitt, we have a guy from his company, one of his coworkers, Matt Bennett, Ross Baldwin from agmarket.net. There's been people who are much more popular in the mainstream press, and we have people who are popular in the farm ag broadcasting press. But we're looking at, different analysis because Sean Hackett speaks differently than Ted Seifert does. And that's something, again, to me, it goes back to just what is the information. We really kind of hang. The PBS model is about the information, the varied information.
Yeah, I agreed with you, but we need to be careful about the current situation.
The current, are you talking tariff situation or just overall political situation?
Yeah, overall.
I know. I'm with you. It is hopefully, if you've got somebody that's watched us for a long time, they know how a certain analyst talks and views the market and frames things and can understand that in perspective and contrast to what's going on in the world.
Right. Yeah, I know that farmers are great people who care about the land and demand food for the world.
They do, and farmers come in all shapes and sizes, farm sizes, things like that. Uh, think about people around you in Ottawa, people around me in central Iowa. There's medium, small, and large, and farmers everywhere are always kind of under a microscope, but then a lot of times left to be alone until it impacts people in the grocery store. And that's where I want to make sure that we're always paying attention to agriculture and not just when there's a crisis or when there's something really, really good to celebrate. I think that's the importance of a show like Market to Market or Backroads, Illinois.
Agriculture is pretty important for our economy with the world. I do really appreciate the farmers in the Midwest.
Now you're starting to sound like people when I go out and talk amongst those who know what Market to Market is, or my relatives that were active farmers for a number of years. And I have an uncle in particular that for years had always talked about, we have to understand, people need to realize what agriculture does to this world. It's talked about often on our show. They feed and fuel the world, and they are important. And they are a vital part of the economy, both locally in what they're producing and buying and supplying to the world, in a statewide effort, in a global effort. They are important, absolutely.
Are you serious about that? Paul, because I love my career.
Am I serious about the value of the farmer? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I drive through rural spots all the time. I mean, I grew up in an area, and I know how things have changed, and I see the differences. I lived through the 1980s farm crisis. I was on a farm in the 1980s farm crisis that came out on the other end, and I know how serious it can be. And I know that there are farmers who feel they matter and they will continue to matter. And people need to know what they're doing and how important it is for the average person to go about their daily life. Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, anywhere, everywhere depends on agriculture. In big cities even, I think we often talk about it here amongst our staff of why Market to Market needs to be viewed in large cities as much as it needs to be viewed in small towns and in rural areas, because it all matters. You think of Chicago with all the history of the agriculture there, stockyards, Board of Trade. You think of Minneapolis, all of the big food companies that have come through there, Kansas City and all the stockyards, Omaha, all the feedlots, everything that's gone through these large cities, Dallas, Texas, Los Angeles. There's no bigger food movement than what there is in California. It absolutely matters, and all agriculture and food production is vital.
I was born in Chicago, but I live in Ottawa since '03. Ottawa is a small town in central Illinois.
And if Ottawa didn't have farmers, Caesar, you would have a different community. There are farmers who buy seed, chemical, take their grain into town. There's those who live in town who have jobs at either maybe a small manufacturing plant that supports equipment, or maybe it's the technology side. They're in every community. And that's what I think makes farming and agriculture important to everyone.
You're right about that, but urban areas take over.
They do. In fact, I'll go back again to Matt Bennett recently on the TV show, talking about the shrinking number of acres, because of urban sprawl or new shopping areas, new Amazon distribution facilities that pop up outside of town. Ottawa. I know exactly your area because I know it's along the interstate, and it's a prime area for distribution centers. And that was farmland at one point that's gone. However, we're really good at producing corn and beans on the acres that we have. And you hope that it's the not as high quality land that's going out of production. But sometimes it is high quality land going out of production that's used for other things. But it wasn't that long ago that it was 140 bushels to the acre corn. And now you're usually over 200. So we're good at taking a little bit and making a lot.
Yeah, however, we're still in a small town.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story here about, you mentioned urban and small towns and big cities. This is what I talk about a lot at the Iowa State Fair. More than 1 million people come to the Iowa State Fair every year. I've covered the fair going on 20 years now. And for the last 3 or 4, I've had conversations with people, drive them around the fair and record it for this podcast. And the Secretary of Ag in Iowa, Mike Negg, is someone I ask. He's on the board of the Iowa State Fair. He's also someone who's at the fair every day, has events there. And I say, do you think it's the fair's job? Is the fair's job to bridge urban and rural together and celebrate the two together? And he thinks that it is. And I think it is. I think it's a great opportunity to have those who live in Des Moines and Cedar Rapids and Council Bluffs and Davenport come to the city and learn about agriculture. I just want people to go off the main avenue and go into those cattle barns and the sheep barns and the hog barns and engage with the farmer and have a good discussion. I think that's how we get closer together, Caesar.
I do really appreciate having him. He should be next secretary, yeah.
The guy who went on to be USDA chief was the governor of Iowa for 3 terms. Tom Vilsack served in that role. Mike Negg, I guess I've never asked him if that was something he aspired to. He's doing a pretty good job of serving Iowa farmers right now. He had a busy week as we record this. USDA head Brooke Rollins was in Iowa, and they looked at some of the key parts. They looked at ethanol. They looked at, they toured a farm. They, talk about Iowa's role in all of agriculture. So yeah, it is important to have big names come. I guess go back to what you asked earlier about having big names. It's good to have big names come to Iowa to talk about agriculture.
Hogs industry in Iowa.
It's big. It's a lot of big. I think it's more pigs than people in this state. So yeah, we know hogs in Iowa. We know hogs in Minnesota. We know hogs in Illinois. We're really good at again taking a small footprint and making a large product.
Cattle?
Cattle are also, I mean, I grew up on a cattle farm, not a very big one by today's standards, less than 100 head. I learned a lot of choice words when sorting cattle from my dad. And, you know, he's talking about people riding the gate or being the gate person. But it got to be a point that, you know, it gets in your blood. Cattle feeding's great. There is something about it, looking at a cow's face. It's hard not to love them driving by, seeing them on the hillside there. We just were in Nebraska with Ross Baldwin on a celebration 50th anniversary tour here for Market to Market. And Nebraska's different than Iowa. There's a lot more big cattle lots there. Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, they have them. We don't have that many in Iowa, but we do have them, and we have smaller operations, and that's always usually a good start. And I always think that cattle market is something that'll be here. Again, small market cattle, you can do a lot for your neighbors. You can grow a lot of food for yourself. Go to your town locker. It's a big economic part. Let's go back to that. It's a big economic part as well.
Did you meet with Dr. Temple G. Paul?
Dr. Temple Grandin, my boss, David Miller, has featured her before on Market to Market. And we were just kind of talking about her the other day for a reason. But I mean, no, I'm familiar with her work. Think she's done wonderful things for the industry, changed the humanity of it and the design and revolutionizing something that had been around for decades. And she's made great changes, and her fingerprint is going to be on the industry for quite a while.
I met her in person last year.
Fantastic. Where did you meet her at?
The University of Illinois.
You have a lot of guests from the University of Illinois on. I think Todd Gleason is a regular for you. Is that right?
Yes, sir. However, he's my mentor and the farm broadcaster.
That's a very good one to have, and there's a lot of great ones out there. Let me ask you another question here for a minute. How do you see what it is that you do as important in agriculture, and how you want to tell stories? And you're a people person, but I mean, how do you mix it all together, Caesar, to get a story that's important for people?
Just getting ready to go beforehand. I want to just make sure to do it.
You just want to make sure you do the stories and get the people out there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You don't want, and see, I like that, because you are not trying to be the story. And I don't think I'm the story. I think the people that you and I talk to are the story and their information. And I think we're the conduit there to get that information. I think that's how we are similar.
Who the Paul?
All right, Caesar, I'm not one to, I don't have a hook on the podcast like some people do, where they have like, we're going to do 3 things or 5 things or 10 words or something like that. But I'm going to put you on the spot. You got 3 available spots for your podcast. 3 of the biggest names that you want to have on your podcast. Who are they?
Oh my gosh, you're getting me in trouble.
I know, right? I get the same thing. People ask me that same question. Well, who do you want? And it's like asking who's your favorite guest, or what's the biggest story that you've done. You can't pick. It's all fun. And I am not a big name person where I am just like, I have to have these huge celebrities, whether it's in agriculture or just everyday life. I enjoy people who have a passion for what it is they're talking about and are genuine and tell good stories. I could listen to certain people tell great stories all day. That's for sure.
I mentioned about Dr. Template, but I went to talk about Jim McCormick. It is my goal.
Great goal. Absolutely a great goal. That I think I'm going to just back off and not make you name 2 more, or 1 more, because you've named 2, and that's fair.
Thanks.
As you said, I don't want to get you in trouble. That's so true.
How about the Cubs?
Oh, let's it's hard for a Cardinal fan to talk about the Cubs, but the Cubs are off to a great start in a couple of capacities, and I think Cub fans should be excited. We have one huge Cub fan on our crew, and when we get ready to record on Friday, I usually have to be up. I watched the Cardinals last night give one away, and I'm afraid that's kind of the way the season's going to go. But I think the Cubs are gonna. Let's just put it this way: I think the Cubs are going to have a better year than the White Sox, but that's not really sticking my neck out.
How about the Bears?
Oh, now that's intriguing. The Bears, I saw a fun picture of the head coach from the day he was hired to this week, and the dude looks pretty stressed. I mean, he looks tired. He looks really worn. Like this is quite a monumental task he has, is trying to get the Bears back in. I really thought the Bears were going to make a better playoff run last year. We'll see how their draft goes. Do they have the right quarterback? I think, but I don't know. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I didn't like the old coach. He seems that he didn't care.
That's a bold statement right there. They cared enough to cash the checks. Let's just call it that. Actually, that's actually one of the fun things I talk about with Chris Robinson whenever he comes out to see us is I'm like, where are the Bears going to play? Is this Arlington Heights thing going to happen? Is it going to be downtown? Are they going to stay at Soldier Field? I don't really know. It seems like we don't talk football. We talk everything around the team.
Right. They should in the downtown.
I think they should too. I think that's where a stadium belongs, is in the downtown. And I'm a fan of the Chiefs. They are not downtown. They've talked about moving. The Royals have talked about moving downtown. I think the Chiefs would be well served. But you lose when you're downtown. You don't get the same atmosphere, tailgating, spread out that you get in, say, a Kansas City or to an extent a Lambeau, even though Lambeau is in town. It is just a great atmosphere when you can spread out and get to see people. Whereas a downtown stadium, it's a little more hanging out in centralized, bars and restaurants than it is necessarily outside of your car.
Yeah. Do you like to watch the Vikings?
Oh, they still have a team? No, yeah, I do. The Vikings, they're fun to watch. My son and I are Chiefs fans. If we had to watch somebody second, it's the Vikings, the Bears, the Packers, the Lions. I tell you what, the Lions were fun to watch the last few years. A couple of Iowa State and Iowa guys on those teams. So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton. I'm surrounded by Vikings, Bears, Packers fans, Chiefs. To an extent, Broncos. I have a brother-in-law that's a big Broncos fan. So, yeah, I'm surrounded by them all. All right, Caesar, I appreciate all this conversation. I hope this episode went as you thought. So this was my first crossover episode where you and I are releasing the same episode. So thank you for helping me make some MTOM history.
Thanks again to have me on your podcast.